Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. We do have quite a bit of information to go over. So, again, if you do have any questions, we'll hopefully have some time at the end of the presentation to review. In addition, this presentation will be available online shortly after we're done today. So, let's go and get started. Now, desert turfgrass. Many people might be thinking that we're talking about artificial grass. However, we're not talking about artificial grass today. We're actually talking about the real grass that we grow in our front yards or backyards. And although we do offer rebates here in the city of Scottsdale, if you want to remove your grass, we can help offset some of the costs. We also understand that real grass can be an advantage, for your home if you like a little bit of grass in the backyard for your pets and things, or if you want a little bit of grass for the aesthetic value of the grass. So our goal today is to discuss the components of growing healthy grass, but doing it hopefully with the minimum amount of water. We want the grass to look nice, but we don't want to overwater. We want to save our water because we're certainly at a time with water shortage that any little bit of water we can save will help us. So that is the goal today. So we're going to talk about the different uses for the turf grass, um, the different grasses that we grow here down in the valley. There's more than just Bermuda grass and ryegrass, but these are the most common that we see. We'll talk a little bit about soils, the fertility needs of the grass, how to properly mow, some horticultural practices, including aeration. Then we'll get into the watering requirements. We do have some general guidelines for you for growing the grass depending on the season. Talk a little bit about weeds. I'll give you my 10-cent spiel about maybe having the summer grass just leave it dormant for the winter and save a little water that way. And then we'll go into the process of putting in the winter ryegrass over the Bermuda grass. And again, some tips on how to reduce the water during that period of time if you choose to put in the winter grass. All right, so most of us here today, the most common usage is going to be at your home. So a lot of people like to have some grass in their backyard for their pets, for their children to play, or just a nice green, cool space in the back. Some people have it in the front yard too, and that's okay. But we're a little more focused on understanding the needs of people having grass in the backyard, but that's certainly up to you. Now, the turf grass that we're talking about is the kind of grass that'll grow together to form a playable field, whether you can walk on it and play on it, or just a full coverage of the dirt that would be there if you didn't have some type of ground cover. So we're going to see it in our municipal parks. We have hundreds of acres of parks in the city of Scottsdale that are gorgeous. They're well maintained. This is a picture actually of Camelback Park, if you're familiar with the Indian Benwash Greenbelt. We also use it for our sports fields. This is a picture of Scottsdale Stadium, and this would be somewhere where we highly manage the grass to produce real high quality grass for professional sports, baseball players and sports people that use it so that they stay safe and and are able to perform their skill on a professional level. Also, um, we have the grass look good because a lot of this stuff is televised. So when Scottsdale, all eyes are on Scottsdale, we certainly want our grass to look nice. Some of you may be here that are part of an HOA board or a landscape committee, and certainly you have grass in your homeowners association. This is an example of a Scottsdale community. I chose this picture because you see some beautiful grass and some trees, but then on the bottom half of the picture, there's a little desert landscape or some natural landscape that used to be grass. So this particular community decided to remove grass to save water, but not all of their grass. So reducing the amount of grass is also something that we might be able to assist with our rebate program and can save the community water. Okay, now we're going to dive into some more detailed um, items relative to the turf grass. So Bermuda grass. So there's a lot of different types of Bermuda grass. Some that we grow that's very small that we put on our golf courses and our greens. Some that grow a little taller, and we have that in our parks. So there's different varieties. However, Bermuda grass all has the same general characteristics. It is a warm season turf grass. The typical growing period is from April 15th through October 15th. However, if you don't put in the winter grass, you can actually keep the green Bermuda grass and keep it green. I've seen it up through December. In warm winters, I've seen it actually stay green for the whole winter. So there is a possibility that if you're not going to put in winter grass, you can have that summer Bermuda grass look good deep into the late fall or early winter. And then our typical growing period starts around April 15th, sometimes sooner. When it goes dormant, it does not die. It does turn color and goes dormant, like it's sleeping, like a bear hibernating. It goes dormant based on two things: water stress. We just simply don't water and it turns brown, and eventually it'll die off. Or the low temperatures. So when we get below 60 degrees on a regular basis, the soil temps are then going to be a little cooler than that, and then it's going to start to turn color. And on the other side of it, when we start getting regular temperatures, above 60 degrees and our soil temperatures start to warm up, then we're going to see it become active again. So the growth characteristics are going to be, it's a creeping type grass. If you've seen it, you see like little runners. We call those the stolons. Underneath the ground are called rhizomes. Those are growing points, and they poke up through the soil, and then they become stolen. So it is a type of grass that will coalesce fairly quickly because of the way that it grows. It is drought and salt tolerant, but it does not like shade. Many of you have seen communities or maybe in your own house that in the summertime there's hardly any grass underneath the trees, and that's because it simply does not like shade. And so here's a couple examples of some Bermuda grass. Those runners I talked about are the stolons. There's a crown and there's some roots. This is actually two different varieties of Bermuda grass. One is a little larger variety, so the mowing height is taken a little higher. And then the bottom one is an improved Bermuda grass. There's Tiffway and there's mid iron and there's Tiff green. There's all kinds. And many people at their homes actually have this improved grass. When I say improved, it means that it was created by us, people that do that kind of thing, and it does not produce viable seed. So that means it doesn't have any pollen. So that's a nice characteristic. The Arizona common grass that you'll see a lot of it in our parks, the seed heads do produce pollen. So depending on what you have at your house or at your HOA, you may have never known, but depending on what type it is, it may not produce pollen. All right, so I got a little picture here. I just want you to kind of take a peek at it, and then at the end, if you write down in the comments what you think is going on here. But let me give you a little information. So this is Bermuda grass. If you see in the distance, it's green and lush and just looks beautiful. And then you see closer up, there's not a lot there. There's a few weeds. There's some holes in the ground because this area was just aerated, which means that they poke holes in the ground to increase the water and oxygen exchange through the soil. But the irrigation zone runs through both areas. All right. So that means these are getting the exact same amount of water, and anytime they fertilize, they're getting the exact same fertilizer. So I'll let you guys think about that for a little bit, and we'll see if we can come back to that, and I can let you know why one looks great and one not a lot going on there. So that's our Bermuda grass. Now let's talk about our ryegrass. So ryegrass is typically used in a wintertime if you want to have green grass during the cold months, December, January, and February. Now, there are a lot of communities and landscape companies out there right now actually starting to put the ryegrass out. I am not a fan of that. It's hot. And so when you put the rye seed out this early in the season, I mean, today's the 12th of September, there's a lot more need for irrigation. Um, and I'll go into that more when I talk about the overseeding process. But common sense would tell you that if it's hot out and you need to just keep the seed wet, that you're going to need to irrigate it more often. So I'm not a big fan of doing it right now, but we'll talk about the best time to do it here a little bit later. But the ryegrass, it is a cool season turf grass. Um, there's two main varieties, perennial and annual. The growing period typically is going to be October 15th through April 15th. After April 15th, we'll begin to have it'll start to go dormant because it's hot and we'll get some die off. Some of it will actually go dormant and come back the next winter. Especially if you've overseeded for a few years and then you decide one winter not to, you may actually get a little ryegrass that comes back, and you can manage that, um, through herbicide. So the perennial grass, it wants to go dormant or die off completely during the summer high temps, and when the humidity kicks on, it'll really start to go away. The annual grass is not as hardy as a perennial, so as soon as the summer higher temps come, it'll go away. The perennial is a little darker green, a little prettier than the annual, but the annual is a little better if you're just trying to get some color in the winter and then you want it to die off quickly so you can have a really nice stand of summer Bermuda grass. So the growing characteristics for the ryegrass are going to be it's a bunch type. So it has tillers. So no stolons, no rhizomes, just tillers that tiller and basically make the plant larger as it tiller outs. It doesn't coalesce very well, so that's why they usually will put a lot of seed down, and then they may have to reseed if they have some patchy areas. It is drought and shade tolerant, and it's very shade tolerant. So again, if you are seeing dead spots around your trees right now and you do overseed, you'll notice that, wow, the grass looks really nice in the wintertime. And that's just simply because the ryegrass is tolerant to shade. So let's take a peek at what this looks like. So there you go. You see some rye seed heads. We use it in bread. It's not my favorite, but some people really like it a lot. Um, we have the roots, and just we can see how on the left it's just starting to tiller, and then on the right it's tillered a little longer. So there you go. That's your winter grass. And here's a nice picture of some winter ryegrass. It's again, it's a little deeper color. It's very pretty. It has a shiny back leaf, so that in the wintertime when it's mowed, you'll see some stripes from the mower in there, and that's because of the shiny back leaf. So there's an example. This is actually a picture taken quite a while ago at Civic Center Mall before they renovated it. So if any of you have been around Scottsdale for a while, you might recognize this area. Now let's take a look at soils. So we're going to understand our plants and how they grow. We need to understand the soil, what it does for the plant, and what kind of soil we have, so that we know how to best irrigate the plants, and in this case, the turf grass. So the soil is going to provide water, oxygen, nutrients, and general support for the plant life. When it says water, we can overwater our plants to the point where there's no oxygen left in the soil and kill our plants that way. I've seen it quite often. Not necessarily with the grass, although you can certainly do it during the overseeding period. If the rye seed gets too much water and there's not enough oxygen available for the seed, it'll dampen off, is what they call it, and die. So we certainly don't want to overwater anything, but especially during the seeding process, and our plants are just, we're not talking about plants today, but we all have plants. And I've seen a lot of plants die in the summer from overwatering, not necessarily underwatering. So there's four major components of soil. There's the mineral matter, the organic matter, and of course, water and air. We're going to talk a little bit about the soil texture, which makes up the mineral matter here in a minute. So some of the common problems we have with soils that don't allow for real healthy plant life, it gets compacted, especially the soils that we have here are clayey soils. And when they're compacted to the point where the plant roots can't move through the soil or the water can't move down into the soil, we start having a lot of issues with our turf grass and our other plants. We can have thatch and salt buildup. Thatch is the dead grass that will, the grasses shed their dead leaves and things like that, and we get a layer of thatch. Now, a little bit is good, but too much, and we start walking on the grass and it's real spongy, it can create an issue where it's sucking up some of the moisture. It's not allowing fertilizer moisture down deeper. So I'll talk about a way to manage the thatch, and then salt buildup. Salt buildup is pretty common here in the desert. We don't get a lot of precipitation. So when we irrigate, there's salt in the irrigation. There's salt in the soil already. So salt and plants they don't really do well together. The salt can bind on the roots of the plants and cause the plant to have struggles taking up water and nutrients. So the best way to not have salt buildup is through proper irrigation techniques. And I'll talk about it with our schedule today for the grass. In addition, when we do get some good long rains, it'll help leach the salt. And for our regular plants, if we don't get any rain, then we have a class actually on plants. But by deep soaking the plants every time, we're forcing the salt deeper into the ground, and that's also a good thing. So salt, that can be an issue. And we'll discuss these things a little bit later in more detail. So back to the soils, determining soil texture, how and why. So the how of it is the jar test, which I'm going to show you in a minute, will help you understand the relative portions of sand, silt, and clay. The why is we need to know that so we know how to properly irrigate. So let's take a peek at this slide. There's two pictures on here. The one on the left is the soil texture test. So this is an old mason jar. We can get any jar really that is clear. We would want to go out to our, if we have a grassy area, we want to kind of dig the grass away from the soil, and then get that soil, take a few different samples from around the yard, and then put it into the jar. Try to get out as much grass and thatch and any other things that aren't actually soil out before you do it. And then you put some water in there and shake it up, and then wait about a day. And then you can then look at and classify your texture. So this example shows that this particular soil has 8% clay, 29% silt, and 63% sand. So we're going to call that a sandy loam type of soil. And so if we look at the picture on the right, it'll tell us, based on what our soil is, how to properly irrigate. So for the sandy loam, we're going to be more in between the sand and loam, and you're going to see that it's very porous. The sand does not retain water very well at all. If it's a little more on the loamy side, meaning more silt, then it'll retain moisture a little better. But again, the sand itself is going to be more like a potting soil that you might have in your potted plants, and the water is going to go through it very quickly. And that also means that you can't water it for a long time, or all your water is going to be, past the root zone, or in the pot. It's going to be all over, wherever the pot is underneath the pot. So we irrigate those differently. And I'm not going to talk about that now because we are mostly dealing with a clayey soil here. The only time you're really dealing with a sand based or a sandy loam is going to be the golf courses and the sports fields. The professional golf courses where they have, not professional, but our golf courses, the tee boxes and the greens are typically made up of a sand based soil as well as the Scottsdale Stadium and our nice soccer fields up north here, and they're watered differently. But that's the medium of texture that you want to grow the premium type turf grass. But here at our yards and our HOAs, we're mainly dealing with a clayey type soil. And you'll see that it does hold water well, but it's very slow to absorb the water and it's slow to release the water. So the idea to irrigate it, we're going to go over here in a little bit, but we're going to irrigate in a manner for our grass that we're not going to irrigate all the water at one time because you may have a need to water the pop-ups for 15 or 20 minutes. But as if any of you have done that, you'll see that there's a lot of puddling in the grass. If you have a little slope, then the water will run off. How many times we drive through neighborhoods and we see water, just on the sidewalk or running down the gutters? And that's because we're applying the water too fast and it can't absorb it. So a means to get more water into the ground and less water waste is to do what's called cycle and soak. And we'll talk about that more in a little while. But the bottom of the clayey water and soil type graphic does say do not apply the water faster than the soil can soak it in. So you need to water in cycles. All right, now what else we need to know about growing grass? How about a little bit of fertilizer? So this is a very basic slide about fertility for the grass. So the role of fertilizer is to deliver plants the nutrients that they need. Now, there are some nutrients already in our soil, but because they're in this clayey soil, they can be very hard to extract out of the soil through the plant's root system. So even things like iron that are that there can be abundance in our soils, we still have to apply iron for our plants, or else they won't have enough iron for growth. There's actually 16 different nutrients that are necessary for the plants to function properly. NPK stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the ones that we consider the major nutrients they need. And then the minors would be all of the other ones, including, manganese and calcium and things like that. How often to apply? So when you're growing grass, I recommend applying it monthly during the growing season if you want a more lush looking grass. Now, if you're comfortable just applying it once for the season, that's fine too. But the more you apply it and apply it correctly, uh, the more chance, the more growth you're going to get. But it also means you're going to have to mow it more often. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, how much to apply? So we consider the square footage of our area of grass. We divide it by 1,000, and then we divide it by the actual nitrogen pounds per bag. So the number of bags to apply to deliver 1 pound of nitrogen. So that's our goal. Every time we water, or every time we fertilize, we want to apply 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So again, this will be available for you online to kind of go over some of these slides if you like, but that's a general guideline for applying the fertilizer. There's a lot of different fertilizers that we can put down depending on the growth, the growth stages of the grass, Bermuda and the rye. This 1 hour presentation won't go to that level, but we're hoping that having a little bit of understanding that you can then take this information and do a little more research online to kind of get familiar with how that grass will respond best depending on the fertilizer that you apply. You can apply it with drop spreaders or handheld broadcast spreaders. Here's some tips. Don't over apply or apply when grass is wet. So if you're out there with your bag of fertilizer in the grass and you're scooping it into your spreader, typically fertilizer will spill and you'll get a little spot with a lot of fertilizer in one location and it'll burn the grass. You may have seen in your HOA or even at your home if either accidentally you did or accidentally the landscapers did it, and you'll see dead grass and maybe a little line of yellow, and that's usually related to fertilizer burn. When grass is wet, we never want to apply Pelletized fertilizer when the grass is wet. It'll stick to the leaf blade and cause burning. The appropriate way to do it is don't water the day before you are going to apply the fertilizer to the grass. So the grass leaf blade is nice and dry. Make sure you go out there and there's no morning dew or anything like that, that the grass is dry. Then you apply the fertilizer and then you give it a good soaking so that we get that fertilizer down to the soil. There are fertilizers that foliar fertilizers that are taken up through the leaf blade. But we typically don't do that in the HOAs in our homes. That's something more for the golf courses and the professional sports field. So that's a different animal. But your typical pelletized fertilizer, this is the appropriate way to do it so you don't burn the grass and you get the fertilizer down into the soil where it's needed. So again, that's just a couple sentences on fertility. Let's talk about mowing. So, typically when we think about mowing our grass, I don't know that we think a lot about that other than, oh, man, it's time to mow the grass again. So one thing I'll just say off the top of my head, if you are fertilizing and applying the right amount of water, you're going to obviously notice that in the summer when the humidity hits, the grass really grows a lot. And if we're mowing once a week, and we find that after we're done mowing, later that day or the next day, we have a lot of brown patches. It's because you scalped the grass. Scalping the grass is not good. We've taken too much of the leaf blade off at one time, and now the Bermuda grass has to use reserves to provide the green color again, and the green color is necessary for the photosynthesis process. So we're going to pay attention. If we are growing the grass a lot, we might need to mow twice a week. Um, and so keep that in the back of your mind when you're fertilizing the grass quite a bit. So mower types, we have rotary, reel, and vertical for verticutting. Most of us have rotary where it just spins around and whacks at the blade. The reel mowers, we can have those at our homes. Typically, you won't see them in a commercial use other than professional sports fields. But the reel mower is the best way to mow the grass. It's going to scissor it, and it's going to provide the cleanest cut. So if you really do want to have a really nice looking backyard or make a little putting green or something back there, get yourself a nice reel mower because that's what's going to be the best way to cut the grass. The vertical verticutting mowers are used if you are having a lot of thatch and you're getting a lot of plants just kind of growing on top of each other, the stolons, and it's usually from, putting a lot of fertilizer on. The vertical mower will cut through that, bring up some of that thatch so you can rake it away, and then create an environment where it'll level out the grass so it can continue to grow without causing more and more bushy effect. How often to mow? We talked about that. We're going to do the 1/3 rule. We never take more than 1/3 of the leaf blade off. So if it's 3 inches tall, we're not going to take more than an inch off because if we do, we're going to be scalping it. So I usually can, suggest HOAs and homeowners that just want a nice looking lawn, not like a putting green or anything like that, to keep their mowing height at about 1.5 inches. So when they mow it 1.5 inches and then it gets to 2 inches, take it back down to that 1.5 inches. So that could be mowing, two, even up to 3 times in the summer if you're really fertilizing it a lot. But when you mow it once a week and the grass is really growing a lot, that's when you're going to discover the issues you have with that scalping and that browning effect that you're seeing that you may not like. Usually after a couple days, it'll start to green up again. But again, you're damaging the plant every time you do that. Leaf clippings. Do we leave them? Do we not leave them? Well, I think it's a good idea if we're mowing correctly and we're only taking 1/3 of the leaf blade off to leave it. It will provide a little extra nitrogen and a little bit of thatch, which is good for the soil. And it's a little bit of a mulching effect. So leaving the clipping blades, or the leaf blades, is a good idea. Now, if you're mowing once a week and there's you've got like hay everywhere, I would go ahead and bag that and or rake it up because that's just going to be too much. Um, too much of the clippings to do anything good for the plant. More maintenance. So if you are not mowing, but you have a service that mows for you, you may ask them, are you keeping your blade sharp? Are you, the oil needs to be changed. If there's any leaks associated with the lawn mowers, that's going to damage or kill the plants. Got to keep that air filter nice and clean. And if you're doing it yourself and it's a gas mower, we got to make sure that we don't overfill and we don't pour the grass into the mower when we're on, we don't pour the gas into the mower on top of the grass because certainly we're going to have maybe a little spill here and there, and then that's going to kill the plant. Now I want you to look closely at that picture. So this is a picture of some grass that was recently mowed, and you will see that the ends are frayed quite a lot. And so that means that the mower blades were not sharp and just basically bluntly whacked off the top of the Bermuda grass. So now the Bermuda grass has to use stored nutrients and hormones to repair that before it can continue to grow. So that's what we're talking about. Mowing is a big deal that we don't think about a lot, but mowing correctly can really add to the appearance um, and to the overall health of the plant. Now, we talked about aeration a little bit prior. Aeration is the process of poking holes into the ground. So I think we've all seen that before. And then we'll have what look like little Tootsie Rolls. I remember when I was a kid, running around and they're Tootsie Rolls, grab them and throw them at each other. So the aeration is actually a very, very good benefit to the Bermuda grass. I don't recommend it for ryegrass because it is damaging to the grass. The Bermuda grass can quickly recover and coalesce, where the ryegrass, you'll be pulling out ryegrass plants everywhere, and then it'll just thin out the area. So I only recommend it for Bermuda grass. What it does is reduces thatch and improves water and air exchange, water infiltration, the air oxygen exchange. So it's a very good practice. If you are working with an HOA or on the board of directors, I highly recommend it at least once a year, if not twice a year, if you have areas of a lot of compaction. And you would know because there's not a lot of grass there. And if you're ever to go out there and maybe it's a high walking traffic area, maybe there's a lot of special events on it. But certainly aerating is a good practice for our Bermuda grass. There's two main types. There's more than just two, but the kind of aeration that you would do as a homeowner, where you'd rent an aerator, from Home Depot or something. You're going to get the core aerator, which is the one that's going to poke in the ground and pull out soil. And that is what I recommend. There's also what's called solid tine, where it just simply pushes holes into the ground. That helps too, but pulling the core out will actually give you a better benefit. And then if you do have those cores, you just simply leave them there. When you water, they'll start to degrade, and when you mow, it'll chop them up because it's just good to keep it in the yard. You don't have to, rake them up and throw them away unless you just don't like the way they look, and then you can do that. When and how often? So I usually recommend June, July, and August. If you're only going to do one, let's do July or August because that's when the Bermuda grass is the most active. And again, it does damage the plant. So we want it to have the ability to quickly recover and coalesce. And so that we fill up all those holes. And you'll notice too, if you look down where those holes where you'll see little grass roots growing in there real fast. And again, it's a really good practice for the Bermuda grass. Now, a pitchfork. I've used a pitchfork at my home for years as a way to do some small areas that are compacted. Now, it is like a solid tine, meaning it's just poking hole down in there. But again, it's very good if you have specific small areas that water's not going in, and this will allow you to get some holes and get more water into the soil, and that'll help improve the turf grass response. All right, what else do we need to know? We need to know our watering requirements, right? This is really where we come into play, and we want to give you some guidelines that are going to be helpful so that we're not underwatering or overwatering. Now, we take our watering cues from weather stations that provide weather reports. Um, well, let me rephrase. It has weather reports, but it also has what's called evapotranspiration data report. So what you're looking at right now is one of those reports. This report actually is something that you could look at today if you were to Google Phoenix area turf water use report. So again, that's Phoenix area turf water use report. Google that and it'll take you right to this. ASMET um, is the site. And so it's going to show you this data. What is this data? Transpiration, that's a loss of water from the leaf surface. Evaporation, that's a loss of water from the soil. So these losses of water make up the ET value, which tells us how much water we're supposed to put back in the ground so that the grass is properly watered. So we have the combined water losses, and that's going to be the plant's water use and the soil's water use. And then we need to put that water back. So, for instance, on September 7th of 2022, for Bermuda grass growth, you will see the weather stations at these different areas, Phoenix Greenway, Desert Ridge, out in Maricopa, and then there's an area average. So if I water every 3 days, and I want to have it look good, but I don't need it to look crazy, then I'm going to need to give it a little over a half inch of water, 0.58. Now, if I want it to look a little better, then I can give it more than that, 0.66. If you're not going to water once a week in the summertime, but it gives you a weekly average there. And you'll notice over there, acceptable quality for the week is 1.34, high quality is 1.52. So that is a measurement of precipitation. So then you're like, okay, Dave, well, what does that mean? How many minutes do I run this stuff? Well, we're going to get to that, but I want you to I wanted to show you the scientific, or the best way we can come up with how we to know how much water to put back. Again, you can play with this. There is in Asmet, there's different tips on managing turf, and there's a really good couple page explanation on evapotranspiration. So you can, if you are interested, you can really dive deep in understanding the process of evapotranspiration and how the weather stations use different sensors, solar radiation and wind and precipitation and things like that to determine the water needs of our plants. So let's get into the watering. Watering requirements. On the left, that's a little small guidebook. It's about 20 pages. We offer those free for anybody, citizens, landscape companies, HOA board members. We don't offer it to people that are just going to use it to start a fire, but if we don't know, we're not going to come chase you down. But it is a great guidebook. It goes into great detail on how to properly water our grass and our plants. It uses the scientific methodology of ET. It's a wonderful book. If you would like one of these books, I would ask you to send us an email. We'll put that email in here later. But the email address, if you want to write it right now, is waterconservation@scottsdaleaz.gov. So if you send us an email, we'll send you one of these books. We pass these books out whenever we work with our Scottsdale HOAs or commercial properties or our residents. We offer a lot of free services to help people reduce their water. So if you want to take advantage of any of those services, you can send us an email as well. So from the book, we came up with some basic things to help you get started. So let's talk about some basic irrigation management tips. We always suggest watering in the morning or evening to reduce evaporation loss. Watch your plants. In this case, watch your grass. If there is a small patch of grass that doesn't look like it's getting enough water, well, let's not water everything more. Let's just see if the sprinkler head is not hitting that area and it's hitting the street now. It got out of adjustment. Or maybe something got broken or damaged, or maybe it's clogged. So when you have just specific areas that look like they're not getting enough water, turn the system on and actually review to make sure all the sprinkler heads are hitting the area appropriately. The only time we really want to increase our watering is when the whole yard looks underwatered. New plantings, this is actually relative to if you're putting plants in there. So we don't need to worry about that. You can always skip an irrigation event when you're watering your grass or plants if we have some rainfall. We got a couple nice rains recently, and maybe we'll get some good rains this winter. That'd be nice. And certainly less water is needed during cooler, rainy weather. Now, specific to the Bermuda grass. Now you'll see there it says not overseeded with winter ryegrass. So this is focused 100% on you are only going to grow the Bermuda grass. You're not planning on putting any ryegrass down for the winter. So typical pop-up spray head sprinklers where they just pop up and they cover the whole area, they don't rotate, will deliver about 1.5 inches of water per hour. Well, that's about the same amount of water we need per week in the summertime. So we've broken it up for you. So how do we get that? Well, those pop-up spray heads delivering approximately 1.5 inches, some deliver a little more, some a little less, but that's a good starting point. We want to run each event for 6 minutes and not longer. And if you remember why, it's because of our soil type. We do not want to overwater our soil and have that water running down the road. So we do it for 6 minutes, no longer. If you have small rotor heads, there's a variety of them. You can refer to the book to get some precipitation rates for those. But typically homeowners are having the pop-up sprinkler heads. Now, what are our run times? Well, we're looking at 3 start times: cycle and soak. Only 1 hour between events. We don't water at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The soil's dried out by then. At 6 p.m. it's hot. That second cycle is doing very little for the grass. So usually when someone's watering for 6 minutes in the morning, 6 minutes in the afternoon, they're watering every day. And they're wondering why the grasses still look a little peaked. If you follow this schedule, I believe that you're going to see a nice difference where I recommend like a 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and 6 a.m. The first time we water, we're going to get down a couple inches. And then the second time, an hour later, we're still going to have moisture in the soil, but it's not going to be puddled. There won't be anything on top of the soil. It'll actually have gone down a little bit. So we put that other irrigation on. Now the water's been able to go deeper into the ground, and then we're going to put that third application. That's going to get that water deeper into the ground so that our roots grow deeper, so that the roots and the plants, it's going to be more drought tolerant in extreme heat. And we want a root activity for the Bermuda grass down about 6 to 8 inches for it to grow properly and be nice and healthy during the summer. Now, how often are we going to do that? Well, in the summer, we're going to do that every 2 or 3 days. Not every day. So if it's extremely hot and the grass doesn't look great at every third day, then go every other day. And you may only have to do that for a week or two, and then you come back to that every third day. The more you pay attention to the grass and the more you're willing to make adjustments on your controller, the more water you can potentially save. Now, as we go into fall like we are now, as soon as we get to that under 100-degree mark, which has been elusive, hopefully we'll get there soon, where we kind of hang below 100 degrees. Now we can go out to every 3 to 4 days. We're going to do that until we get cool enough in the wintertime where the grass is now dormant. Certainly every 4 days. So basically just like once a week when we're around that 70-degree mark. And then we can just cut it off. We only need to water the Bermuda grass once a month if there's 0 winter rain. If we have some winter rains, you don't need to water it at all. We just don't want to completely dry out the plant and the soil. So, once every 30 days. Now, when we in spring, when it starts to warm back up, we're back to every third or fourth day. And then we're going to get into our summer schedule. So we want you to adjust the controller at least 4 times a year. But what you're noticing that you're not adjusting is you're never adjusting the runtime and you're never adjusting the start times. All you're adjusting is the frequency. So you have a lot less to do with your controller when all you're doing is adjusting frequency. Winter ryegrass. Well, we don't promote it, but if you would like to have it, great. We do ask you then to refer to that landscape watering by numbers book. Page 13 will give you some good guidelines. I can tell you that typically what happens in the with the winter grass is when they put it down, they have to water, or you have to water several cycles to get it to germinate. But then when it gets cold in the wintertime, there's still usually daily irrigation or even multiple cycles during the winter, and it's just a huge waste of water. The grass doesn't need it. So in the middle of wintertime, you can typically get away with just one 6-minute cycle. We don't need the water to go as deep in the ground because the ryegrass doesn't have as deep of a root system. And maybe once or twice a week in the wintertime. That's all you need for that grass to look good. If it's raining, keep it off. There was a couple winters recently, last couple of years, not last year, the year before, but the years before that. Um, we didn't need to water anything for 2 to 3 months because of the rain. It would rain once a week or once every other week. It was staying moist. And a lot of communities that weren't watering just saved a lot of water and a lot of money. So that's the basics of the water requirements. This is probably very different than what you've seen or to be out there, but trust me, it works. And you can certainly experiment. You can always add a minute or delete a minute based on what you think is best. You can always add a day or take a day off. This is just a great starting point for you. If you need to make a change, certainly do it based on your area. You might have a shaded area, it doesn't need as long of a runtime. You might be in an area that's just so hot that it needs a little longer runtime because the soil is taking it. If the soil can't take it, then you might need to add another cycle to get the water in there. So again, this is a great starting point. Let's continue on water requirements. We got to learn our plant water requirement. We're talking about turf grass today, not the artificial grass. We're going to irrigate turf at night or in the early morning. We're going to shut off the controller when it's raining. We can also install rain sensors on almost any controller that you may have right now, or you can upgrade your controller. We have a rebate for smart controllers. And if you want some information on that, just get on our website and Google Smart Controller Rebate. The website is scottsdaleaz.gov. Then you can take advantage of these rain sensing opportunities where the controller will just shut down on its own so you don't even have to worry about it. At least monthly, turn on your irrigation system and look for leaks. Look for broken sprinkler heads. Look for sprinkler heads that have gone out of adjustment and are watering the neighbor's yard instead of your yard. Irrigation systems need maintenance. And if you have a landscape professional, ask them to do it. They might not know to do it on their own, so you would ask them to. I would say if they come to your property once a week to mow the grass, every time they mow the grass, when they're done, turn the system on. Look for leaks, look for damage. Many times the lawnmowers and or the weed eaters are the ones, the machines that are causing the damage to our sprinklers. So I highly recommend you or your professionals checking the irrigation system for leaks and adjustments. And then finally, water and cycles to reduce runoff. So this is kind of a recap of what we've talked about a little bit. Let's talk about weeds. We all get weeds. What's a weed? So it's any plant that is not wanted. When I have several certifications, and one of the classes we were talking about weeds. The first picture was a football field with a rose bush in the middle of it. And they said, "Is that beautiful rose bush a weed?" And yeah, I guess it is because we don't want it in the middle of the football field. So it's any unwanted plant. Unwanted plants rob the plants from food and water. So weeds in the grass are not helping your grass. The best defense is actually just having a healthy lawn. Properly irrigating, properly mowing, properly fertilizing can usually choke out most of those weeds. Now, there's a couple herbicide programs that you could follow. Pre-emergence is it's either a pellet or a liquid that you can apply to the lawn. You'll need to water it in, and it can prevent weeds from uh, growing past the soil. They create a barrier in the soil, and they kill the weed before it even passes through the emerges through the soil. Post emergent would be like your Roundups or some of those others, diquat and things that if you had a weed and you just wanted to, quickly kill it off, you would use the post emergent. Post emergents are not the greatest in turf grass because they tendency to also kill the grass. Um, Pre-emergence can be very good for Bermuda grass, but not so good if you're going to put in the the winter rye seed, right? So we've really got to kind of pay attention to what kind of grass we're growing and then determine what kind of weed program we want. My favorite's mechanical removal. You got a few weeds out there, just get out there and, pull them by hand or get yourself a little, screwdriver or something that can pull the weed out. You want to try to get the roots out with it, but um, that's the safest thing for the rest of the plants. So you're not putting herbicide on anything you don't want to. So that's a little bit about weeds. But I will tell you, if you're growing a good, healthy stand of grass, you're going to have a lot less weeds to contend with. However, during the overseeding process, you got to be careful that sometimes weed seeds get in with the rye seeds. And I've seen a lot of new winter ryegrass lawns that were half weeds, and that was because of the seed that was applied. So be careful of the seeds that are being applied for the winter grass. All right, now let's see if I can talk you out of overseeding. Again, overseeding is the process of scalping the Bermuda grass in October and then putting winter grass over the top of it. So if you make a decision to not do that and you let your Bermuda grass just naturally go dormant, usually around December, you're going to have, part of December, January, February, where it's just a blonde color. It's not dead. It's just gone to sleep. And then you put the ryegrass over the top of it. If you choose not to do that, you'll save an estimated 8,000 gallons of water per 1,000 square feet. So if you're in an HOA and you have an acre of grass, 43,550 square feet, do the math. That's quite a bit of water. If you have 2,000 square foot backyard, that's 16,000 gallons of water right there. That's quite a bit of water. You're also going to you're going to have cost savings, dollar savings. You're not going to have to pay for labor, seed, fertilizer, and water for the winter grass. Not overseeing will produce cleaner air because you're not mowing it, you're not kicking up a bunch of dirt and dust. So it'll be a little cleaner by not overseeing. You reduce noise pollution, right? Why is it always the neighbor landscaper shows up at 5 and you have to get up at 5:15? Yeah, it's like, oh man. So at least in the wintertime, you reduce some of that mower and blower noise. We reduce fertilizer runoff that ends up getting into our watershed and causing our lakes and our rivers to have a lot of aquatic plant growth, and those aquatic weeds then suck up the water and makes less available for us, for our use. It also demonstrates a person's commitment to sustainability in our desert environment, and it increases health and vitality for the spring, summer, fall Bermuda grass. And again, we can have that Bermuda grass really growing 3 seasons, and we're only giving up just that one winter season where the grass is kind of blonde looking instead of green looking. So this picture here will show you you got the winter ryegrass right next to the Bermuda grass, and if you keep the dormant Bermuda grass free of weeds, uh, if it's dormant and you got a few weeds, you can spray the herbicide on them, or you can pick them out, but just keeping it nice and clean, it's just really just a difference of color. I know a lot of the golf courses, the target golf courses, they'll have some dormant collars around things and some dormant areas. And I don't know, if you kind of get used to it and it's well maintained, you might be able to enjoy it through the winter. So there you go. There's my 1 minute spiel on how to potentially save some water and money by not putting in the winter grass. But we might want the winter grass. So if we're going to do it, let's do it properly. I do recommend mid-October. It's plenty warm enough to grow the seed quickly. It'll save a lot of water and a lot of money. Again, there are a lot of places out there that I see that are overseeding right now. It's a month too soon. They're going to just use a lot more water than they need to. So mid-October is ideal. Stop fertilizing the Bermuda by September 1st. We don't want the Bermuda grass super happy and actively growing because we're getting ready to damage it by scalping it. So we got to stop the fertilizer. Now, if you're going to overseed earlier than October 15th, then stop the fertilizer prior to that. So let's just say 6 weeks prior to overseed, stop fertilizing the Bermuda grass. You will want to reduce the irrigation by 25%, but we don't need it. A lot of landscape professionals just shut the water off completely. That's not a good practice. That's not healthy at all for the Bermuda grass. And one of the reasons why, after overseeding your property for so many years, if it's not done properly, the Bermuda grass becomes thinner and thinner. And then, especially, I see a lot of HOAs. It's just like in the summer, you just have a lot of weeds and dead spots. And one of the reasons is just completely stopping the water to Bermuda grass. So I'm just recommending 25% reduction 30 days before. I'm recommending not mow 2 weeks before. Let the grass plant get taller, and the leaf blades will extend and grow out. So then when you do come in to scalp, you don't have to go all the way down to the dirt. It's better if you leave a little bit of the Bermuda plant instead of scalping it down to the dirt. It won't interfere with the weed or the seed making contact to the soil because you've grown it out. And now when you scalp it down, um, you will get the seed through there. Seed at the rate of 6 to 8 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Do it in two directions. There are a lot of places that'll do more than that, but it's really not necessary. The birds are going to eat it whether you put down 6 or 8 pounds or 5,000 pounds. So usually 6 to 8 pounds. You can put a little light mulch over the top if you like. However, mulch is another factor in weeds. I don't think I've ever seen a a weed-free mulch. They'll say it doesn't have weeds. Maybe you can find some, like at Home Depot that you're going to pay a lot of money for because they're bagged, but the larger HOAs and parks and things, that mulch is usually has got some weeds in it. So be careful of that. It's not necessary, but it can hold some moisture. If you seed later, like in November, and it's a little cooler out, then the mulch will help keep the seed a little warmer. So it does have its applications. Okay, now we're gonna do all that. Then we're gonna irrigate the seed 3 to 4 times per day, usually during the day. Once a seed is on the ground and moisture is on the seed, it'll start to grow. If at any time the seed dries out, it will die and will not regrow. So it is important that you keep moisture on the seed. Now, once the plant reaches about 1 3/4 inches, then you can mow it at 1.5 inches. And then we're going to decrease irrigation to once every 2 days. And maybe 1 or 2 cycles, depending on how the grass looks. If it looks good, just that one cycle we talked about. And then after that, you may be able to reduce the irrigation even more. And there's just a little note to follow the ET data on ASMET for more seasonal adjustments, or kind of like what I said, every, maybe once or twice a week in the wintertime.